Hi there, I'm Tim Clark reporting from E3 in Los Angeles, and I'm joined by Nintendo gamers Matthew Castle.
Hello, Tim.
We've just been over to Koreatown's finest internet cafe to check out Satoru Iwata's big reveal, well, pre-press conference reveal. And the job, Matthew, seemed fundamentally to me to kind of explain what the hardware is, show the kind of core functionality in terms of what it does, because last year it was a complete farrago. Everyone seemed quite unsure as to what they were being shown. I mean, for half of it, I thought I was being shown an SD controller, but we have a reasonable understanding of what Wii U is now, but I guess this was a job that still needed doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's basically, I think the idea was they wanted to, before their Tuesday conference, was get the hardware out of the way so they could focus on the software. There was a lot of things today with, this all makes sense on Tuesday kind of thing. So yeah, and the majority of the actual speech was last year's sizzle reel of Wii U, broken down with audio commentary, which is basically what everyone needed back then, which was saying like, look, this is the dual screen playing golf, this is me using a touchscreen, which I guess is what people needed.
There was a lovely moment it was the opposite of last year, because last year was such a confusing cloud of weirdness, but this year they took the level of explaining down to going, we've invented this thing called Miiverse. It's both me and universe, and that's how it's become. Like that was the level of nuts and bolts they were going into. But so what did you make? Because there was news nuggets in there, and one of which was this the Pro controller, or more commonly, as I imagine, it will be known as the Xbox 360 controller. Yeah,
and they've basically, with the tablet itself first, or as they're now calling it, the Wii U gamepad, they've moulded it to be a little bit more like a controller. On the back, it's a bit more obvious kind of grips. It had this shelf last year, but now it's got grips. They've also added analog sticks, which are clickable, which it didn't have before, which is basically bringing it in line with a 360 pad. And then they showed the Wii U kind of new classic controller, which is a 360 pad. So, the idea being that you can just play, and the games that will work well on PlayStation 3 and 360 can translate very easily to Wii U.
Yeah, I mean, you still didn't get much of a sense of, there's been much talk about kind of how powerful it will actually be, and because they weren't showing the software yet, hard to tell, I guess, but just from the pad alone, it's obvious the methodology is to make it so that games can be easily ported. But in terms of other stuff that was interesting, what really stood out for you? Was it Miiverse?
Yeah, it was the Miiverse. I thought it was interesting that they finally said the Wii U tablet is a universal TV remote, which they hadn't said before, so it really will be the one remote to kind of rule them all, which is kind of what we needed.
Does that mean you'll have to throw it into a volcano after you've had it for 3 years?
Yeah, maybe. That's when you can't get past that final boss and, chuck it in. I guess the big thing was Miiverse, which is their new sort of home hub system / online social element. Which in typical...
Nintendo do online and social really well, so that should be fine, right?
Well, no, what they do is, they always do this, they take something which is quite a common idea, and they go, well, we can't do that, because we've got to do our own thing, we've got to take a slightly kind of curveball, left-field approach to it. So they've taken the idea of just sort of instant messaging, which makes sense, except they've then tied it to a very kind of, what strikes me as a very game-specific system, in terms of messaging your friends about moments in the game, and almost having like a per game Twitter feed.
So did you read that as it was, you would just, I mean, I guess we'll find out more as the show goes on, but so they ran that, what looked to be very expensive and fairly embarrassing video with John the hipster douchebag on his sofa getting stuck in a kind of a, I don't know if that was actually a zombie game that we're expecting, or if that was just like some Gennaro zombie footage, but he got stuck with the boss, and then he jumped onto his not Twitter but sort of Twitter feed, and there were people going, well, this is how you beat that boss. And the idea of it being linked to not just the top level of the game, like you might follow Mass Effect on Twitter, but actually being linked to specific sections of the game made it feel like, and certainly with also how they had the stuff popping into games later at key points. That seemed really interesting to me, because people love Dark Souls, and Dark Souls has a similar kind of ambient social messaging.
That was that sort of revolutionary thing. Everyone says with Dark Souls that it's the kind of game which brought Twitter into it, in terms of it made it a community experience. The idea being that even in a single-player game, you're playing together, which was Iwata's message throughout that. I guess that's going to be their big focus. I mean, the things with like Super Mario having kind of congratulatory messages popping up at the end of levels, going, "Well, nice one, I did this level as well," or that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think that's cool. I'm a little intrigued to what their actual broader sort of online offering is in terms of communication between players, but the idea of this sort of always online kind of experimental, people chipping into your play experience, and that sounds great. We'll have to see who's using it and how they're using it. I know last year Ghost Recon guys, for example, Ghost Recon Online talked about a very similar thing for their game, so I guess that's what they were talking about there. They called it the Ghost feed back then. But yeah, the idea of that functionality built into every single Wii U game, whether or not people want it or want to use it, and that's cool. Like,
personally, I mean, I thought the whole thing actually was, what ideas there were really interesting. I thought it's kicked the whole of E3 week off to a really good start. Like, E3 is always best when there's new hardware, and the social stuff. From back in the days of being able to see other people's Ghost replays, it's that lovely sense of like someone else has been here before me and being able to kind of check out what they're doing. But I guess other than that, the main reveal was obviously the porn curtain.
The porn curtain, which is the web browser, which, like the 3DS, you'll be able to pause Wii U games and go into a web browser, and that's also where this Miiverse stuff takes place. But part of the fun is that you can either browse it on the tablet and also have it on the screen at the same time, or you can browse it on the tablet and draw a curtain across it on screen, and then surprise family members with images. So prepare for horror, Grandma.
Yeah, we'll keep that goatsy picture saved on your tablet, and you won't go far wrong. All right, so I mean, before we wrap up, overall, were you pleased with it, Matthew? Was it kind of what you expected? You were very excited beforehand?
Yeah, absolutely. And if they can pack that much before the show, I can't wait to see what they do with an hour and a half on Tuesday. I think it's going to be great.
Me too, and we'll be back after that to see how excited Matthew is then. Cheers all.